You started saying no, not loudly, not dramatically, not to prove a point, just quietly, a one word at a time. And something strange happened. The people who loved controlling your time started acting different. The ones who only showed up when they needed something suddenly became uncomfortable. The room didn't get louder, it got quieter. Because people get used to the version of you that always bends, always explains, always sacrifices. They build expectations around your silence, around your guilt, around your fear of disappointing everyone. Then one day, you stop handing out pieces of yourself like they're free ore, and suddenly your peace begins returning in ways you never noticed were missing. You thought saying no would make you lose people. But instead, it started revealing who was only standing beside you, because you never had boundaries in the first place. The day you stopped explaining yourself didn't look important. No dramatic music. No life-changing moment. No crowd standing there watching history happen. It looked ordinary, almost forgettable. Just another day, another conversation, another moment where someone looked at you expecting the usual version of you to appear. The version that always had a reason ready. The version that felt pressure to justify every choice, every absence, every delay, every decision. The version that carried invisible guilt for simply existing in a way other people didn't fully understand. For a long time, you thought explanations were necessary. You believed if people understood your reasons, they would understand you. If you just used the right words, maybe they wouldn't get upset. Maybe they wouldn't judge you. Maybe they wouldn't leave. So you explained everything. You explained why you were tired, why you couldn't come, why you changed, why you needed space, why you felt different, why you said no. You gave people pages of explanations when all they asked for was a sentence. And even then, it was never enough, because people who benefit from your guilt are rarely searching for understanding. They're searching for access. Access to your time, your energy, your attention, your peace. And every explanation you gave became another door left unlocked, another invitation for debate, another opportunity for someone to tell you why your feelings weren't valid enough, why your choices weren't reasonable enough, why your boundaries suddenly needed approval from a committee of people who never carried your pain. You started noticing something strange. The more you explained yourself, the more exhausted you became, not physically. Something deeper. A kind of exhaustion sleep never fixes. Because every explanation felt like standing in a courtroom where you were both the accused and the defense attorney, constantly presenting evidence proving you deserved basic human space, constantly defending decisions that shouldn't have required permission in the first place. And slowly, without realizing it, you became addicted to approval, not because you wanted attention, because you wanted peace. You wanted people to say, "Okay, I understand." You wanted relief from that uncomfortable feeling that maybe someone somewhere misunderstood you. So you kept explaining, kept shrinking your truth into words people could digest, kept editing yourself into a version easier for others to accept. Then one day something inside you became tired. Not angry, not broken, just tired. Tired in a way that changes people. Tired in a way that makes silence feel heavier than arguments. Someone asked why you couldn't do something. Someone wanted a reason. Someone expected another carefully wrapped explanation tied with guilt and apology. And for a second, your mind prepared its usual speech. Then nothing happened. No paragraph arrived. No defense strategy appeared. No panic rushed in. Just silence. A strange silence. The kind of silence that feels illegal the first time you experience it. Because for years you had been trained to believe that choosing yourself required permission slips. That saying no required evidence. That disappointing people automatically made you selfish. But standing there in that moment, something felt different. You realized explanations had become chains disguised as kindness. And suddenly you saw the pattern. Not everyone was listening to understand you. Some were listening to negotiate your boundaries. Listening for weaknesses. listening for guilt, listening for cracks they could slide through, because explanations reveal more than reasons. They reveal uncertainty, and uncertain people become easy to control. The day you stopped explaining yourself, people noticed, not because you changed your voice, because you changed your energy. Confused faces appeared. Longer pauses entered conversations. People looked at you differently, almost like they lost access to a language they had spoken for years. Some became frustrated. Some acted offended. Some pushed harder than before. Because when people are used to unlimited access, boundaries feel like betrayal. And when people are used to controlling your reactions, silence becomes unsettling. You stopped handing out pieces of yourself to anyone demanding proof. You stopped treating your choices like crimes requiring defense. You stopped carrying the exhausting responsibility of making sure everyone understood you before allowing yourself peace. And somewhere in that silence, you started meeting a version of yourself that had been buried underneath years of unnecessary explanations. People become uncomfortable the moment you create boundaries, and the strange part is, most of them won't even understand why. They'll say you changed. They'll say you became distant. They'll say you're acting different now. But what they're really feeling has nothing to do with your attitude. It has everything to do with access. Because people rarely notice your boundaries when you have none. They only notice the moment a door that was always open suddenly starts closing. For a long time, you were available. Available for last-minute requests. Available for emotional dumping. Available for favors, sacrifices, endless conversations, endless understanding. You became the person everyone could reach, because no matter what was happening in your life, you found a way to make room for everyone else. Even when you were exhausted. Even when your mind felt heavy. Even when your own problems were quietly collapsing around you. You still carried people on your shoulders and smiled while doing it. And people adapt to comfort very quickly, faster than you think. Human beings build expectations around patterns. If you answer every call, they expect every call answered. If you always say yes, they stop appreciating it and begin assuming it. If you constantly sacrifice your peace for others, eventually it no longer looks like generosity. It starts looking normal. It becomes part of your identity in their eyes. That's where the trap begins. Because once people get used to a version of you that constantly gives, they create an image of who you are supposed to be. Not who you truly are. Not who you want to become. Just the version most convenient for them. The version that says yes without hesitation. The version that apologizes even when doing nothing wrong. The version that never asks for space, never disappoints anyone, never chooses themselves first. Then one day, something changes. Maybe life becomes heavier. Maybe your energy disappears. Maybe you finally realize peace is becoming expensive. Maybe years of exhaustion finally catch up with you. So you begin making small changes, tiny ones. You answer later. You decline invitations. You protect your time. You stop explaining every decision. You begin saying simple words that once felt impossible. No, not with anger, not with hatred. Just with limits, and suddenly, people become uncomfortable. Not everyone, of course, but enough people for you to notice. Some become cold, some become distant, some act confused. Others suddenly accuse you of changing as if growth was some kind of betrayal. And at first, this hurts. Because you think boundaries should make people respect you more. You think protecting your peace should feel empowering. Instead, it feels strange. Like walking through a room where familiar faces suddenly seem unfamiliar, because boundaries expose relationships in ways comfort never can. You begin noticing who respected your kindness and who simply depended on your lack of limits. You start seeing who valued you as a person and who valued access to you. And those are two very different things. Some people never wanted all of you. They wanted convenience. They wanted your time without asking. Your emotional energy without limits, your attention without balance. And when boundaries appear, They feel something they haven't felt before: restriction. People don't usually react to boundaries themselves. They react to losing privileges they never realized they had. That's why the guilt arrives, because guilt becomes the final weapon. The invisible pressure. The voice inside your head whispering that maybe you're being selfish. Maybe you're becoming cold. Maybe protecting yourself means hurting people. But look closely. The people who truly care about you may need time to adjust, but they don't punish you for changing. They don't make your boundaries feel like crimes. They understand that limits are not rejection. Space is not hate. Silence is not betrayal. The uncomfortable truth is that some people loved the version of you that had no walls because they never had to knock. They walked in whenever they wanted, took what they needed, expected your energy to be waiting like a room with lights permanently on. And the moment you finally locked the door, they weren't upset because you disappeared. They were upset because for the first time, they realized they needed permission. The hidden cost of always saying yes never arrives with warning signs. Nobody hands you a bill. Nobody sends a message telling you what you're losing. In the beginning, saying yes feels harmless. It feels kind. It feels like being a good friend, a good son, a good partner, a good person. You help people because that's what caring people do. You show up, you give your time, you sacrifice your comfort. You become dependable, and for a while, it even feels good. People appreciate you. They smile at you. They praise your kindness. They tell you how much they value you. You begin believing that being needed means being important. But invisible things are dangerous because you don't notice them disappearing. You don't notice the moments you cancel plans with yourself to make room for everybody else. You don't notice how often your own needs get moved to tomorrow. You don't notice how many times you say, "It's okay," when it really isn't. You convince yourself you're just being mature, just being generous, just being understanding. And little by little, your life becomes a waiting room where your own priorities sit in silence while everyone else gets called first. Because always saying yes doesn't just give people your time. It trains them. People learn your patterns faster than you realize. They learn that no matter how late they ask, you'll still show up. They learn that even when you're exhausted, you'll make room. They learn that your boundaries are flexible, your limits negotiable, your peace available for purchase at the cost of guilt. Not because they're evil, not because they're all selfish, because human beings naturally become comfortable with what is repeatedly available. Comfort creates expectations, and expectations quietly become demands. At first, people ask politely. Then they assume. Then they stop asking entirely because your yes became automatic. Your kindness became routine. Your sacrifice became background noise. The scary part is they're not the only ones getting used to it. You are too. You become so used to saying yes that saying no starts feeling wrong, unnatural, dangerous. You begin feeling responsible for everyone's disappointment. You feel guilty when someone feels upset. You feel pressure when someone needs something. You carry invisible weight everywhere you go, because somewhere along the way, you started believing that your value came from being available, and that belief slowly starts eating pieces of you. Not loudly, quietly. You lose rest, because you're busy fixing problems that were never yours. You lose peace because your mind belongs to everyone except yourself. You lose time because your schedule slowly becomes property shared by other people. You lose energy because constantly carrying others leaves nothing for you, and eventually something strange happens. You begin feeling resentment, not toward everyone, toward yourself. Because deep down, part of you knows the truth. Nobody forced this life onto you. You handed it over. One yes at a time. You ignored your exhaustion, ignored your frustration, ignored the voice inside your head that whispered, "You need space." You convinced yourself that self-sacrifice was strength. That endless availability was love. That giving more and more somehow made you a better person. But over, Giving has a dark side nobody talks about. People start meeting a version of you that no longer exists. The happy version, the energetic version, the patient version. And behind the smile, you begin feeling empty, because while everybody receives pieces of you, nobody notices you quietly disappearing. Because constantly saying yes teaches people to expect your presence, while teaching you to abandon your own. Then one day, the hidden cost finally reveals itself. Not in money, not in arguments, not in failure. It appears when you sit alone and realize you barely recognize your own life anymore. You look around and notice you've become busy, but not fulfilled, surrounded but lonely, needed but exhausted. You realize your calendar is full, but your mind feels empty. You realize everyone knows where to find you, yet somehow you stop knowing where to find yourself. Because every unnecessary yes carried a price tag nobody showed you at the beginning. Your peace, your identity.
Your time, your energy, your silence, yourself.
You never noticed peace leaving your life because it didn't disappear all at once. That's the trick. The most important things rarely leave with noise. They don't slam doors. They don't announce their exit. They fade slowly, quietly. Like sunlight disappearing from a room while you're too distracted to realize the darkness is growing. And somewhere along the way, your peace began slipping through tiny cracks you never paid attention to. Not because you were weak. Not because you were careless. Because you became busy surviving expectations. Busy answering everyone. Busy showing up. Busy proving yourself. Busy carrying responsibilities that kept multiplying until your life started feeling less like your own and more like a crowded hallway where everyone else had access except you. You told yourself this was normal. You told yourself adulthood meant pressure, stress, constant noise, constant demands. You convinced yourself exhaustion was proof that you were trying hard enough. And whenever life felt heavier, you ignored it. You pushed through. You adapted. Human beings are good at adapting to pain when it arrives slowly. That's why you never saw what was happening. Because peace rarely disappears in obvious ways. It leaves when your phone becomes the first thing you check in the morning and the last thing you see at night. It leaves when your mind starts carrying unfinished conversations long after they end. It leaves when guilt follows every decision. It leaves when saying yes becomes automatic. It leaves when everyone gains access to your time except you. And the strange part is this: people around you may never notice. You'll still smile, still answer messages, still laugh at jokes, still show up. On the outside, nothing changes. Inside, everything does. Because chaos becomes familiar after a while. You begin living with background noise inside your head. Endless thinking, endless pressure, endless responsibility. And eventually, silence itself starts feeling uncomfortable because your mind forgot what peace even sounded like. Then one day something shifts. Not dramatically. Not like movies. No thunder. No perfect speech. No giant breakthrough moment. Just a small decision. Tiny. Almost invisible. You say no to something you usually accept. Maybe you decline an invitation. Maybe you stop replying immediately. Maybe you cancel plans. Maybe you choose rest over guilt. Maybe for the first time in years, you decide your energy matters too, and nothing happens. The world doesn't collapse. People survive. Life continues. But later, somewhere in the quiet, you notice something strange. You breathe differently. You sit alone and your chest feels lighter. Your mind becomes still for a few moments, not completely, just enough to notice, enough to remember, enough to realize peace was never gone forever. It was waiting underneath layers of noise you accidentally built around yourself. That's when it begins. Not a transformation, not some magical overnight change, a return. You begin protecting small moments. You stop explaining every decision. You stop volunteering your energy where it's constantly drained. You become more selective with your time. You stop treating exhaustion like an achievement. You stop allowing guilt to negotiate every boundary. And slowly, life changes in ways nobody else notices. You sleep better. You think clearer. You laugh more naturally. Silence stops feeling empty. Being alone stops feeling lonely. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop feeling responsible for fixing everyone. You stop carrying emotional weight that never belonged to you. Small things begin returning. Pieces of yourself. The parts hidden underneath years of people, pleasing and endless availability. And what's strange is the changes don't feel dramatic enough to impress anyone else. Nobody congratulates you. Nobody notices. Nobody gathers around and says, "Look at how much you've healed." Because peace doesn't arrive like attention does. It arrives quietly. Very quietly. That's why most people miss it. They search for happiness in noise, in applause, in being chosen, in proving something, in becoming more. They chase bigger moments while overlooking the tiny decisions, rebuilding their lives in silence. And the more you protect your boundaries, the more peace keeps returning. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Like something finding its way home after being gone for a very long time. Like a version of you that never disappeared. Just a version buried underneath everyone else's expectations. The people you lost were never really yours. That truth feels cruel the first time you hear it, because loss always feels personal. When people leave your life, your mind immediately searches for reasons. You replay conversations. You examine your actions. You wonder if you changed too much, spoke too little, became too distant, too cold, too unavailable. You search for mistakes like a detective investigating a crime scene, because somewhere inside you, there's a quiet fear that maybe this happened because of you. And for a while, that fear controls everything. Because losing people hurts even when they weren't good for you. Human beings become attached to familiarity. We become attached to routines, to names, to messages, to people occupying spaces in our lives. Even painful relationships create comfort, because at least pain you recognize feels safer than emptiness you don't understand. So when people disappear, your first instinct isn't relief. It's panic, because empty spaces are loud. Suddenly there are fewer notifications, fewer conversations, fewer distractions, and in silence, uncomfortable questions begin appearing. Questions you avoided while constantly surrounded by noise. Questions like, were they really there for me? Did they care about me, or just the version of me that kept giving? Did they love me, or did they love access to me? Because here's the strange thing about relationships. Not everyone connects to who you are. Some connect to what you provide. Some people love your availability. Some love your attention. Some love your kindness. Some love your patience. Some love your ability to say yes. But very few people stay when all those things become limited. That's why change becomes dangerous. Not because growth pushes people away, because growth removes masks. The moment you started setting boundaries, people reacted. The moment you stopped explaining every decision, people reacted. The moment you protected your time, your peace, your energy, something shifted. Not in you. In them. People who once felt comfortable suddenly seemed distant. People who always called suddenly became silent. People who claimed they understood you suddenly stopped understanding anything at all. And at first, you blamed yourself. Because that's what people like you do. You carry responsibility even for storms you didn't create. You think, maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I changed too much. Maybe I hurt them. Maybe I became selfish. But look closely at what disappeared. Not everyone left because you became difficult. Some left because you became unavailable for things they were taking from you for free. There's a difference. A painful difference. Because real connections survive boundaries. Real people adapt. Real care doesn't collapse the moment access becomes limited. People who value you learn your new language. They respect your limits. They ask questions. They try understanding. But people who only benefited from your lack of boundaries often react differently. They pull away. They become cold. They act offended. They disappear. Not because they lost you, because they lost convenience. And convenience creates illusions. For years you may have thought certain people belonged in your life, forever simply because they were always around. But presence alone proves nothing. Someone standing beside you does not automatically mean they stand with you. Some people stay close because proximity benefits them. Some remain because your kindness makes life easier. Some stay because you constantly sacrifice pieces of yourself to keep everyone comfortable. Then one day you stop. You stop over-giving. You stop chasing. You stop carrying relationships alone, and suddenly people vanish. The scary part is not losing them. The scary part is realizing how quickly they disappeared once you stopped being useful. Because useful people rarely notice they're being used. Not at first. You call it loyalty. You call it love. You call it friendship. Until silence exposes what effort was hiding. And somewhere inside that painful realization, another truth begins appearing. Not everyone you lost was a loss. Some people were lessons. Some were habits. Some were distractions. Some were mirrors showing you how much of yourself you were willing to sacrifice just to avoid being left alone. And the people who walked away, when you finally chose yourself, were often walking toward the exit long before you ever noticed.